Okay, thank you for coming back. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. I certainly did. First cab off the rank, I'd like to welcome Sarah Pulis from Intopia. Sarah's going to talk to us about accessible design systems. So welcome, Sarah.
And we're up. Hi everyone. I wanted to talk today about accessible design systems. On the screen, so I'm Sarah Pulis, I'm Director of Accessibility Services at Intopia, and if you want to tweet me, you can tweet me at Sarah TP, Sarah with an H. So my team and I have been working with various sort of organisations on different design systems, and I thought it would be great today to come not to necessarily share step by step how to make an accessible design system, but essentially to pull all of the tips and tricks or the little sort of pitfalls that we've come across in helping different organisations to develop accessible design systems and share them with you. So just to start off, giving a bit of context of what is a design system. So usually a design system is made up of a collection of parts. Those parts often include your principles, so the principles around what you're trying to do with your design system. Other organisations call it a GEL, a global experience language. There's certainly different names for what is a design system. Also looking at things like brand and identity, so colours, fonts, images, sounds, how are we going to treat them, what are we going to do with them, you know, what does our brand represent and how do we represent our brand using those particular things. Often it also includes some sort of best practice requirements, and this little diagram that I took off an article by Audrey Hake, I think, H-A-C-Q. It's awesome because under best practice you see the little dot point called accessibility. I see a lot of design system presentations talk about how creating a more consistent, predictable and accessible experience, that's what design systems help us to do. I was at Web Directions recently and they had sort of the 5 benefits of design systems, and there was accessibility in big and bold. So I think it's great that people are recognising that design systems can play such an important role in making things more accessible and more inclusive, but also that consistent and predictable experience across multiple products, particularly in large organisations. So often those areas of best practice, whether it be, you know, accessibility or what is UX or that kind of thing, as you can see in this diagram, come into a design system as well. Now, based on those things like your identity and your principles and language, the sort of other component is the components and patterns. So often referred to as a component library or a pattern library. It's often where you find all your little sort of components, like, you know, your buttons and your text fields and your headings, and some of those components are atomic, so they're fairly small components, and then you can sort of stack those together like Lego blocks to make bigger patterns that you might use across your organisation. So in preparing for this presentation, I put a Slack message out. So we're pretty geeky at Intopia. We have an Ali Geek Out channel, which is where we get in and we discuss all of our, you know, sort of tricky, hairy accessibility problems. And I said, okay, share with me all of your tips for creating a more accessible and inclusive design system. So I took all of those and synthesized them into the 7 tips that I am going to go through. Now, the design systems that my colleagues and I have worked with are pretty much behind closed doors, so unfortunately I'm not able to show you examples from those design systems. We've sort of worked across banking and e-commerce and government, you know, sort of a very wide range of areas and design systems. But I have taken some examples from out in the wild, so design systems that live online that you can also have a look at, and I've got the links at the end of the presentation. So tip number 1, take the time to develop a common understanding of what accessible means and communicate this broadly. So this is actually one of my particular tips, and it comes from 2 points of view. The first is, for me, when we talk about creating an accessible design system and all the benefits you can get from it, it's talking about what does accessibility mean to the organisation you're either working with or your organisation if you're embedded into a team. So I think it's pretty clear that accessibility isn't just disability. For us, at least, accessibility is diversity. And so that can mean anything. It can mean different access needs, people's different needs and preferences, and by developing that common understanding, you're all on the same page. And this can be particularly important. I was recently working with a bank on a design system and had sort of got a little bit of a heads up from one of the team members that the visual designer was sort of pushing back a little bit on some of the accessibility recommendations in the design system. And I said, well, let me take them on the journey, which I had actually spoken to some of the other team around what accessibility and inclusion means for us. And so I talked about how, yeah, hey, we'll make sure it's all WCAG 2.1 compliant and all that kind of thing. But what we're looking at is creating a truly inclusive and accessible experience and making sure those components support that. So we draw on our experience, working with different users in order to inform the design patterns. And of course, always, if we can, doing usability testing, and I'll come back to that in a bit later. After setting the scene for this particular visual designer, we had no problems after that. So having that common understanding of what accessible means can be quite important. I took a screenshot of AirBnB, an article called Building a Visual Design Language, where they're talking about building their design system. One of their principles is universal. AirBnB is used around the world by a wide global community. Our products and visual language should be welcoming and accessible. So that's one of their principles. And if you want to learn more about Airbnb's design system, Michael, wave. So Michael's come all the way from the US just for today to attend OZeWAI. So if you want to talk to him about all things Airbnb, accessibility and inclusion, he's your guy. Tip number 2, wear your undies on the outside. Give people detailed documentation and justification for decisions. So there's a few reasons I say this. First of all, it's important if people are looking at your design system that they know what the sort of, I guess, the underlying rationale for some of the decisions that you've made in your design system. Have you chosen particular colours and given guidance for contrast? Have you chosen to, say, put your hint text above your form field as opposed to below your form field to help screen magnifier users when they're zoomed in so that they have a better chance of sort of seeing form label, help text and then field, as opposed to if you've got 3 or 4 radio buttons, you're obviously pushing that hint text down if you're putting it at the bottom. Helping users or helping people using your design system understand that can be quite important. The other reason I say this is I work with a lot of organisations where even though they understand that a common design system is a great thing, they know that there's going to be 2, 3, 4 different sort of implementations of it because not everyone is using the same system, there's fragmentation in their infrastructure. And so by providing that sort of quite detailed information, if someone's taking that pattern and redeveloping it for a different framework, maybe some people are using React, others are using Angular, it preserves that consistent experience, not just the look and feel, but also those underlying semantics for our assistive technology users. A few examples. The US web design system has some very nice in their documentation space. They actually have an accessibility heading. This particular pattern is for accordions, and they actually go through and detail each of the HTML elements and attributes that are being used. So native button, ARIA expanded true false, and hiding content when a accordion is collapsed using ARIA hidden equals true. So if someone was replicating this, they've got all of those critical that critical information to create a component that really should sort of essentially replicate that base level design system, but perhaps it actually is in another framework. Salesforce also does this. They do also put keyboard interactions, so kind of following the ARIA design pattern structure there for anyone who sort of geeks out over that. They've got keyboard interaction, and then they've also got markup like the US design system. And another example from the US design system for their form templates actually talks about how they've obviously done some testing, in this particular case with VoiceOver, and have noted some attributes, in this case ARIA labelled by that, field set legend I should say, that are not very well supported. So they've said, hey, we're using ARIA labelled by this way, and this is the reason. The one thing I do think is missing from here, what version of VoiceOver? Couldn't find, whether it was VoiceOver 2 weeks ago or 2 years ago, and when it was tested. So you can have that baseline because, of course, assistive technologies do change. They both introduce bugs sometimes and also fix issues. So I think that's an important point that was probably missing from this particular page. Tip 3, don't forget about how components interact. Create helper functions to help that implementation. So my example is from gov.uk design system. Gov.uk has actually decided both for error patterns to have an error summary at the top of your form as well as inline errors. And in the how it must works, there's a little line that says move keyboard focus to the error summary. Very, very common for me to see, lack of focus management in error messages, design systems or otherwise. So for me, this is a really important part of it. Whether it fits at a component level or a pattern level, I'll let you decide depending on how your design system is structured. But for me, this is quite an important thing that is often missed out. The reason I also said create helper functions, my colleague was working with an organisation, and this exact thing came up, the need for a sort of a helper function to manage focus. And they went, it's cool, we don't need a helper function. About 6 months later, they realised there was so much proliferation of people for every single implementation of a form actually creating their own focus management. They're like, yeah, we really do need that helper function to actually, smooth things out, make things a little bit easier. So they came around that a bit slowly, but I think it's an important thing to keep in mind and will definitely save time. Tip 4 is to provide clear content guidance for your user interface components. A lot of the design systems I've worked with actually do have content guidance, which is great, but some of the ones I did look at out in the wild didn't have a lot of sort of guidance around content. So yes, we've got a form label, but what should that form label be? Yes, we've got hint text, but how should we structure that hint text, or how should we structure an error message? The example I've got is from Shopify. They're probably the one out in the wild that I saw that had the best sort of most descriptive content guidelines. In this particular case, it's just a little snapshot of content guideline for field labels for text fields. So they talk about placing them above the form field, making sure they're short and concise, 1 to 3 words, and that they're written in sentence case. And there was a whole lot of other sort of guidance around form labels and placeholder text and how to use that and the like. So they did a great job and probably a good example of giving clear content guidance. Tip 5, send your design system down the deepest, darkest alley and test the hell out of it. I talk to people about the fact that, we've got this opportunity to make the really, really robust design system, particularly when we're talking about the components and the pattern libraries. And I'd rather do lots and lots of different, sort of assistive technology testing. So this is sort of, yep, we're going to tick the WCAG stuff and what have you. Lots of different assistive technology combinations. So recently, a client we're working with, we're actually testing 8 different combinations of screen readers, so your usual sort of JAWS, NVDA, VoiceOver on iOS, VoiceOver and TalkBack, Dragon Naturally Speaking also to see how that works, and things like screen magnifiers, zoom text and the like. It definitely doesn't take away from the need to also being testing those components in situ. You can get all sorts of weird and wonderful outputs sometimes when you actually stick them together. But by really testing the crap out of those individual components, it means if for some reason you can't do as rigorous testing when they all come together, at least at an individual sort of atomic level, they're pretty robust. So things to consider: what assistive technologies and web browser combinations will you test with? What operating systems versions as well? When were they tested? I think you really need to know what versions, when they were tested, and do continue testing as new versions come out. And also, what user research and usability testing will you do as well? So testing obviously is not just technical. I'm struggling a little bit with a lot of the organisations I'm working with where they're not necessarily coming to the table on usability testing for their design systems yet. It might just be a sort of maturity thing, but you know, if you see gov.uk, they've definitely got nods to the fact they've done some usability testing, although I'm not sure of the details of that. One interesting thing from the gov.au design system is they have a little accessibility tab for each component. It has a range of sort of information like what does this component look like for different forms of colour blindness, grayscale, keyboard interaction, but they're the only ones I've seen that actually have this little snippet which is actually screen reader output, so it's what VoiceOver says. I've taken this one step further with the work I've done and actually almost created test cases for screen reader output. So saying what should we hear, but not tying it down to you must hear this exact thing. Because often people who are new to testing with screen readers go, you know, for instance, JAWS says image and NVDA says graphic and that's a problem. And it's like, no, I just need to know it's an image or a graphic. If they don't use the right, you know, don't say exactly the same thing, I'm not too worried. So I actually took this and made it into a sort of more formalised algorithm saying you should hear X, Y, Z. Tip 6. Don't assume other design systems have got everything right, even if it looks like they've got their act together. Steal shamelessly. Absolutely. All the awesome things everyone is doing, definitely steal. But do keep in mind that people don't always get it right. So going back to our accordion documentation from the US web design system, they mentioned using RE hidden equals true to hide content in their accordion. That was fine for their example because they only had text in that area. If you had anything interactive like a link or a button, it would hide the sort of semantics from a screen reader, but you could still tab to it even when it was collapsed. So this works in one particular situation. It actually doesn't work though maybe for your situation if you've actually got interactive elements in that area. So just be conscious of that and do your own sort of testing. And lastly, tip 7, treat your design system as a living organism. Have clear feedback paths and processes that preserve predictability and consistency. So a lot of the design systems online have beautiful, actually even public feedback systems. So this is our gov.au design system where you can actually comment or go on GitHub and log an issue, which is really nice. We have seen design systems though where those processes aren't clear and you get lots of like fragmentation of components. You get people saying, I think there's a better way to do it, and you know it's not feeding back into that core design system. So definitely having feedback mechanisms and processes for addressing this, and processes for also pushing out updates, particularly if you've got that fragmentation where people are building components in different frameworks in the same organisation. Few tips that didn't make the cut. Design hover and focus states. Be predictable. Stay true to your platform or establish patterns wherever possible. Use relative font size, please, please, please. This is my friend Adam, who that was his exact words, is begging people to use relative font sizes. Use sensible defaults, like if you've got a select, using select or select type that as appropriate, and don't use lorem ipsum because it just tends to sort of take away from the understandability of the components. As I mentioned, we'll have the slides online. You can look them up on Intopia SlideShare. We would have just tweeted it if Chris is listening to me in the ether somewhere. So you can link through. These were the ones I sort of looked at and thought had decent sort of accessibility. Always happy to chat. You can contact me on Sarah TP from Twitter or sarah@intopia.digital via email. Thank you.
Don't go too fast, Sarah. I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions for you. Thank you very much, Sarah. Really interesting talk about design language systems. there are more and more organisations that are going down the way of these design systems. One query that I have is, why don't we have a universal design system? Something that everybody refers to say that if you structure an accordion, this is the way, these are the accessibility requirements of that accordion. Sure, we can change the look of it to suit the organisational branding, but interested in your thoughts, Sarah, on the idea of a universal system like that.
So I definitely think that would aid in the consistency and predictability. It's why I tend to be fairly strict on, like, as you mentioned, the accordion, sticking to the ARIA design patterns, even though I will say I don't necessarily agree with all of them, which is kind of also a little bit of a difficult sort of conversation where I think some of them might be technically sort of work, but don't actually work for users. So I think it's that definitely concentrating on those supported patterns. I don't, though, think that we're doing that very well. So I'll pick on Russ. Hello, Russ. You're just going to. I just have to pick on you, so I get it back for all the audience members. You pick on. So the example of how do you associate the hint text with a field. So there's, you can wrap it in the label, so you sort of have form label and help text together. You can associate it with ARIA described by, which means it's actually read after the form field, so you sort of hear form label, text field, help hint text. They're the areas where we don't actually have a standard. There's a lot of different ways of doing things, and the WCAG sufficient techniques, I think, also don't always factor in usability as much as they need to. So, short answer, very good idea. Long answer, not happening yet.
Thanks, Sarah. We are going to take some questions, but I'd also, before we get started on that, I'd actually like to welcome our next presenter up to the stage, Andrew Lizzio. If you can please make your way up here. Now, this is going to be an interactive session, so I'd like to ask everybody to move down into the first 3 rows of the theatre, because your involvement is required in this session. Okay, Andrew.
Hey, Sean.
Hello.
Okay.
Okay. Sarah, I'm not going to ask you a hard question. Normally I know I do. Okay, so two questions is there any design best practice or best practice documentation for low vision out there? Because when I've talked to users and so forth and user assessments, they always seem to have all different views on how it's done. And the other comment is, some of the stuff you've talked about, why isn't we encouraging the browsers to have it natively in the actual browsers?
Okay, low vision. I think the best resource I've seen for low vision was actually the research done by the Low Vision Task Force to inform the WCAG 2.1 update, of which only a handful of those sort of recommendations probably made it into the WCAG 2.1 update. That's probably, for me, the article I've seen that I think has the best research and, behind it. So that's probably what I'd say for low vision. There's nothing else that I know of that I'd say, is good and solid, but more than happy if anyone in the audience wants to share articles. In terms of why do the web browsers don't do it, probably want to ask which particular points you're asking about.
What I challenge with all the time is you find everyone doing their own custom widgets like tree views, panels, tab panels, etc., etc., etc.
Yep.
Having a standardised UI object within the actual browser, like we have with selectors and edits and so forth, in my eyes, would make the life a lot easier for the designers and developers, because assuming the browser provides the necessary properties and methods to be able to give the colour and the look and feel they want, but the underlying mappings and so forth for the accessibility would be inherent in that object, rather than all the hacks that you see.
Absolutely. I don't swim in the HTML sort of, what are we at, 5.2 circles? I think Ross is waving, so maybe he does. I think you're right. For some of those common patterns, I think, I guess we've seen a little bit of it. You know, we had ARIA landmarks and then the HTML5 sort of regions came in that have superseded some of them. So we've seen a little bit of that, but it definitely hasn't worked its way into those complex components. So I don't know the reason. It would be nice. So thumbs up for you, Sean. Heron, are you going to heckle me too?
That was a good presentation, Sarah. I loved it. And because at the end of the presentation, you mentioned about processes to push the changes when there is a fragmented components. Can you please explain that a little bit more? So what could be the process and how could the maintainability of a design system be achieved there?
Yeah, so I think for me the key things are when you put something out into the wild, you're using it to build, pages, forms, that kind of thing. Sometimes things come to light. It could be you're doing more usability testing, you suddenly find something that's not working. You are testing with newer versions of assistive technologies and, you suddenly find something's broken. So it's about allowing teams to find those, giving instructions about, are you fixing it at a individual component level or actually saying, no, look, if our design system is working right, we should be able to take that, record it, prioritize it, action it as appropriate, push it into the sort of global component, and then if you've got a truly, a true design system that then's, hooked up nicely to all of your other assets, then that just cascades out. That stops the fragmentation of someone going, oh, I think this should be better, or, oh, I found a bug legitimately, what do I do about it? I'm not an individual, I'm actually part of a living organism, both my organisation and my design system, so how do I actually do that so that it cascades out to everyone? And for me, it's preserving that consistency and predictability sort of side of things. If we don't have those processes, that fragmentation then leads to, just breaking those two ideals.
Thank you, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Ross.
I was just after your thoughts with existing good design systems. So many of them always seem to discuss foundation elements, so buttons, link text to labels, but they don't really progress into those complex patterns. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that and whether design systems need to mature to the complex interactivity which is found on web apps nowadays.
I think depending on your organisation, I mean, for organisations that have fairly sort of simple interactions, perhaps you don't need as much of that. I think that you definitely, though, need those rules in whatever shape or form they need to be for complex applications. When you're looking at e-commerce apps and banking apps and that kind of thing, where we're having to do quite a lot of sort of fancy stuff essentially to make it work. If you don't have consistency in how those elements work, then we're only sort of got part of the puzzle. So that's why I think it's quite important to see not just at a component level, but also how they hang together, and those principles, guidance, practices, whatever you want to call them and however you want to do them, to make sure that things are as consistent as possible, particularly for large organisations where they've got multiple apps, so they're using this, they've got like 3, 10, 20 different products, some which might be quite simple, some which might be quite complex. I think if you don't have, and I guess I am talking a bit more about a strict design system, so I know you can sort of have strict design systems and loose design systems. I'm probably erring on the side of a slightly stricter design system to make sure that consistency is there. But either way, as long as it's there, I'd recommend that.
Thank you very wow, thought I was ready for that then. Thank you very much, Sarah. Fascinating talk as always. I'd like now to welcome Andrew to the stage. Andrew's from Wizup, and his presentation is Don't Press My Buttons. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Sticky tape, what could go wrong? What could possibly go wrong? Don't press my buttons. We were asked here today to, specifically because we've developed a mobile application with no buttons. Again, it depends on your definition of buttons, but what I'd like to do is to start off with something that my dad-in-law, my second best friend besides my dad, he told me a dad joke this morning, and I said, oh, I've got to use that in the presentation. And so he said, what did the fish say when he swam into the wall? He goes, damn wall. So really terrible joke. But what it does do is it says that jokes, okay, or things are not obvious until you've been told. Okay, intuitive screens, how do they work? One of the trends that we've found, especially over the last few years, so I've been in computers for about 25 years now, and I specialise in designing large governmental systems. And one of the things that we're finding is that screens and mobile devices are becoming less and less form-oriented, and they're becoming more involved in animation and interaction with the users. And so what this does is this starts looking at an accessibility problem. And the application that we're in the process of designing, which is a team of 20 volunteers because we're pre-revenue, so we're all working in our spare time and weekends and probably getting divorced, is looking at things like how do we make these applications accessible? But the application itself is made for education, so education has to be accessible. One of the problems with education is we've got the sticky tape over the play button. I'll try and press it. Can I get you to press it, please?
I'll try.
What could possibly go wrong? And so this video is from two of the education leaders or the spokespeople globally. Just pull it out of there and put it back in again. Put it back in again. Did it work?
A revolution in education.
Right, just open.
One of the real challenges
You educators are wasting time, you're wasting money. Tell the students what they need to know, test them on it, weed out the ones who don't get it, and move along the ones who do. End of story.
Every education system in the world is being reformed at the moment, and it's not enough. Reform is no use anymore, because that's simply improving a broken model. What we need is not evolution, but a revolution in education. One of the real challenges is to innovate fundamentally. So when we look at reforming education and transforming it, it's about customizing to your circumstances and personalizing education to the people you're actually teaching. And doing that, I think, is the answer to the future, because it's not about scaling a new solution. It's about creating a movement in education in which people develop their own solutions, but with external support based on a personalized curriculum.
transmission of knowledge and skills is not enough. We need to engage students in the deep, transformative, lifelong process of reflection and critical thinking and problem solving, and really applying their learning across disciplines and between what happens in the classroom and what happens outside the classroom.
Education is not a mechanical system, it's a human system. It's about people.
So it's about people. One of the things that's critical about people, I suppose, is your ability to interact. And impairment means that you are impaired in that interaction process. So what we're going to do here is we are going to try this. And we're going to put together both of these problems to see, using an innovative approach, one of the possible ways that we could solve this. So this is the interaction side, and what you're about to get now is pieces of paper which you're going to write on the back of. And by the way, we are supposed to be handing these out. These are ANU things, which I've stolen from the front desk, completely organised. So has everyone got a piece of paper and a pen? Have they been given out? Yep. Excellent. Okay, so on that piece of paper, what we're going to do is we are going to answer the question, what does inclusive design mean to you? Okay, so you've got 60 seconds. Just write down a series of dot points, as many as you can in 60 seconds, of what inclusive design means to you. So this is old school, and for people with an impairment, please partner up with someone else. Excellent. How are we going? All right. So with those dot points and with that piece of paper, can I get people to group up into 6? So choose 6 friends, and if you don't have 6 friends, just... So physically organise yourself so that you've got 6 people with you. Okay, with those 6 people, I now want you to pass your piece of paper to someone else, okay, and to do that 6 times. When you receive the person's paper next to you, I want you to use your pen and to give them feedback. Read what their answer was. All right, so we'll have about 20 seconds per person and then pass it on. Do that 6 times. Read what the other person has said. You can even read the feedback. Give them feedback. Inclusive design. Now what we're doing is we're looking at what inclusive design means to others. All right, how are we going? Has everyone got their pieces of paper back with all of the feedback? All right, does anyone need more time? Now that you've got your own paper back, I want you to read all of the feedback that you were given, and you're allowed to change your answer. All right. Does anyone need more time? One person, two people. Inclusive design, what it means to me and what it means to other people.
I need to get a mic. We need to get mics up here?
Yes, yeah, we need roving mics now. Okay, so there's going to be some roving mics that come around. At this point, what we're now going to do is we're going to flip it. So rather than having questions and answers at the end, we're going to do questions and answers at the start, which is right now. So these questions and answers, or these questions that you're about to ask is, right, Andrew has just started the thing, you know, the presentation of don't press my buttons, right? What does that mean to you? And on top of that, we also want you to ask questions, and we're going to write them up on the board here, in terms of what inclusive design means to you and what it means to the other people that you got feedback from. So, questions please. Those two, buttons and inclusive design. And, yep.
If I've interpreted you correctly, a button is bias always wrong? A couple of our people commented on bias, and some of the comments were also, you know, be aware of our biases. But then the question that came out on one of these bits of paper was, is bias a bad thing?
So our first one is button bias. That's a good question. Yep. What does... Sorry?
Yep. Thinking about addressing the widest possible range of abilities in design, and the concept is what about those that we can't include for whatever reason because of their, say, their combination of ability difficulties?
So combinations of impairments, yep.
Disability.
Okay, no, that's a good question as well. So when you came to this conference, what was the burning question in your mind? Why did you come here, besides getting out of work?
Another brave one?
Colin, you're not allowed to answer that. Glenn, you either.
Yeah, can somebody pass the mic? Andrew, could you pass the mic, please?
The big question for me personally was, what can I learn from others that go through the same shit that I deal with, sorry guys, that I deal with every day, and ways that I could get around that or learn to deal with it better.
Problems like what?
Working for government. Again, sorry. How to apply accessibility to what I've been given. Not what I'm doing, but what I've been given. How to get in there, break it apart, and if I have to, stomp accessibility ability into it.
So if we write up on the board here, government accessibility?
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Okay. There's a reason why I said he wasn't allowed to ask any questions.
Anyone else? Yeah, coming.
For me, it's more like what is accessibility. So that was the main driver, because like for myself, it's not, I think a big focus is on like disabilities itself, but it's more like about permanent disabilities, but also just situational, like thinking about like someone traveling in the middle of nowhere and being just restricted by the environment.
Wow.
It's not just like, I think it's important to see like, or to incorporate someone who can't see and can't hear, but like, it's for everyone. It's not like seeing it so, it's for everyone. It's not just, just to describe.
That is a brilliant question, thank you. Yep. So, if we can put up in here, holistic. What will we call it? Holistic accessibility.
For me, it's about dignity. How do we provide everybody a dignified user experience? So they've got equity of access and it doesn't take them longer. You know, there's not additional things required or whatever. And that we recognise that everybody can participate and it's engaging for everybody. That, you know, it's breaking down that concept of dignity.
Yep. So if we can put up in here a dignified experience, is that roughly? Excellent. That's great. Okay, so last question. Yep.
I'm interested in how we surface the actual people with disabilities in organisations. So we tried to raise awareness in our organisation, and I knew someone who had had a temporary disability with an injury, and she experienced all the things like, you know, trying to use keyboard access instead of her usual mouse, and having to do a lot of writing, very challenging, and having to then resort to, how do I do this now? And I wanted to talk to her, to talk to the team about the challenges of this, but she found it, she told me it was for her very embarrassing. So even though everyone knew she had this injury, how do we surface people who actually have disabilities, whether temporary or permanent, and get them to highlight the challenges that they face in an institution, an organisation, a workplace, and also the hidden ones like mental health, which is also a challenge in our organisation as well, when I think we can't legally ask them to disclose. So how do we surface that?
Yeah. And I think there's a deeper question about whether it wants to be surfaced. How should we write that up on the board? I've got no idea. Disclosure. Yeah. Accessibility disclosure. Okay, so what we might now do is, I just want to see a show of hands. How many people are interested in holistic? We've got roughly, I don't know, 100%. So if we can just, in another colour. Combination of impairments. We've got about 30%, if I can say that. Button bias. Button bias, well that's interesting. We'll put up there, it's 10%. A dignified experience. Yeah, I expected that. So that's 80%. If I've got any of these wrong, please tell me. Government accessibility. We all know government are great at accessibility. We're looking at, what, probably 50%? And accessibility disclosure. We've got probably 40%. Well, that's interesting. A dignified experience. I would have never have picked that. One of the first things that I want to do now in this interactive experience is how many people actually looked at a holistic accessibility. Okay, so inclusive design is not restricted to people with physical impairments. Okay, so mobility impairments. So Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm Asperger's. Okay, so with Asperger's or dyslexia, which is also what I've got, numeracy, which is not good for a mathematician, but we all get what we ask for, I suppose. So when it comes to dyslexia, okay, and you are told to write things down, is that an impairment to achieve a goal? Absolutely it is. What about, and this was brought up, what about a location? Okay, so a location disposition. What about when you're sick and you need to attend school? What about when you remote access learning? Okay, all of the things that go with a location. So again, if you're in school, okay, it's about a group activity. What about if you're shy? What about if it's something that you need to operate by yourself, but you like working with people? Mental disability, so things like dyslexia. Okay, if you don't like writing, but you can speak well, how do you answer exams? Okay, how do you attend work when you can't write, but you've got value that you can give? Situational awareness. Situational awareness is a really interesting one in education. How many people have heard of bullying in schools? Yeah, pretty much everyone. So when you're bullied in school, do you think you have an impairment to learn? Absolutely. So when we talk about inclusive design, you can now see that a holistic inclusive design, okay, it actually affects everyone. And when you design systems, it is about being holistic. And what it does is it gives the designer the opportunity to make something which is intuitive. And what I'd like to do, just before I leave this holistic design, how many people had technical, so things like whether you're a technology immigrant or a native, things like location, mental, or situational. How many people had all of those? I kind of guessed that. Yep. How many people had most of them? Some of them. Yep. All right. So it's probably not a stretch to imagine that people think of inclusive design as just being mobility, either mobility, hearing impairment, or visual impairment. HIMIVI. Which is...
Andrew, thank you very much for that. I'd just like to give it about, we've got about 1 more minute thereabouts.
Sure, I'll wrap up.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so in terms of the discussing, the analysing, in terms of government websites, it is about, here's a whole stack of information, here's a form. Fill out the form, here's your buttons. A button is a representation of an action. It is actually not the action, which means that you have to be taught that, you've got to learn that. What we have done in Mosaics is we have removed all the buttons so that everything now is like a series of cards. You flip the cards over, you put them into different stacks. You're able to add things to cards without buttons. There is no such thing as forms or form fields anymore. And so it is natural, it is intuitive. What you just learnt in the activity was about mastery. Mastery is about you're given a bit of content, you learn it, okay? You say what it means to you. You go deep in that very narrow. Then what you do is you look at what it means to other people. So you go wide and deep. That is mastery. With that very simple activity, you performed mastery on inclusive design. And so the thing that we started off with, which was the fish, or the bagel fish, I heard someone say. So the fish running into the wall, it wasn't obvious that there are very, very simple designs that can replace massively complex systems. And that's one of the things that we did, which is a very simple application, a mobile application, which eliminates up to 12 systems which are currently used in education. So it's not about building a faster horse. We've got artificial intelligence and everything all in it, but it is so simple and so personalised to everyone, just like what you experienced. What it means is that accessibility and intuitive design and inclusive design, we now have a framework for putting all of that together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Andrew. Really interesting workshop. Can we move straight into Jocelyn Dart? Jocelyn from SAP is presenting on accessibility and the challenge of scale. Welcome, Jocelyn.
Thanks, Jerry. And just while we're setting up here, I want to say how excited I am actually to be speaking here. I first got to go to this conference 2 years ago, and I've been champing at the bit to come and speak ever since. So couldn't make it last year, so this is hopefully what I have to give you today will be useful. I know that a lot of you are our customers or work with our customers. So this is just a little bit of an insight, and please reach out to me. You can reach me on @JocDart, J-O-C-D-A-R-T, at any time. Or if you ask someone at SAP about Fiori and accessibility, it will probably end up with me anyway. Wonderful. Thank you very much. So I'm just going to give a little bit of an understanding of how SAP approaches accessibility when we're working at tremendous scale. And I've broken this down into the challenge and opportunity of scale, accessibility in SAP user experience, and I'm going to focus just on our flagship user experience, which is called SAP Fiori. It's HTML5 based. Fiori is the design. It's the user experience that all of our modern products and solutions are either using or heading towards. And it's the one, obviously, that's being HTML5 based, has the best accessibility and the easiest to tailor to your needs. And I'll finish up with just a couple of tips on how to maximize the accessibility of your solutions. Now, this deck will be available as part of the conference. I do intend it as a reference deck as well, so there's links and other information. Please take advantage of that if it will help you. So let's talk about scale. So who are we? SAP, our customers include 92% of the most successful companies in the world, 98% of the top 100 most valued brands in the world. About 80% of our customers are small and mid-sized enterprises, and that would include a lot of our Australian government agencies at both federal and state level, and even, say, some of our city councils here and in New Zealand. Our customers, just to give you a couple of random stats, produce 86% of the world's athletic footwear and 82% of the coffee and tea we drink every day. Why are we so popular? Why are we so broadly used? It's because we provide comprehensive solutions to meet essential business needs and to run your business better, faster and simpler. So we do everything from finance, procurement, sales, manufacturing, plant maintenance, distribution. If you name it, apart from flying a plane, we probably do it. That includes over 170 million cloud users who now use our solutions as well. Our flagship solution, which I'll talk a little tiny bit about, is SAP S/4HANA, and we call that the Intelligent ERP, and that works across 25 different industries, public sector being just one. And we have a lot of private organisations in Australia as well. Rio Tinto, BHP Billiton, everyone from Rural Co, lots of different organisations, most of the organisations, a lot of banks, a lot of supermarkets, etc. In that one solution, and this is one of thousands of solutions that we deliver, we actually deliver more than 1,250 of these SAP Fiori HTML5 based apps. So the scale is enormous. And we're big internally as well. We have over 94,900 employees across 130 countries. We have more than 140 nationalities and their accompanying languages in SAP. We have 5 generations of workers. From a diversity and inclusion standpoint, one of our things we're most proud of is our Autism at Work program, which has been going for 5 years now and covers 27 locations across 13 countries, including Australia and New Zealand. We have 140 people at any one time employed there, and we're aiming to eventually reach about 650. We also know we have around about 3,000 employees who identify as differently abled, which is what we call it. This is our vision, our purpose and promise: help the world run better and improve people's lives. It's a bit of a world peace statement at first, but when you think about the scale of the businesses that we impact and the number of people's working lives that we touch, there really is the opportunity to do some tremendous things that actually make it better, not just for people to work every day, but also for participate and engage in employment. So how does this translate to something like accessibility? So if you go to our flagship page for accessibility, where we talk about software accessibility, there are three ways we approach this. The first is accessibility and user experience. So the primary place that we look at accessibility is where you all look at accessibility, is how do users interact with our systems, with our apps, and we're usually talking apps rather than websites. One of the ways we achieve that is we set some very high standards. We set a product accessibility design standard as part of all of our solutions. Not all of our solutions meet that high standard. We do encourage them all. We meet it in our best solutions, and we have to, with such a large portfolio and so many solutions, like most of you, you understand the process of picking your battles. So if you're using a solution and you want to find out what is the exact status of that solution, we provide accessibility product status documents, ASDs for short. US has VPATs, we talk about ASDs, and that will tell you the status against WCAG compliance. And you can get those by emailing us at accessibility@sap.com. We had one of these done for Federal's Department of Finance this year. Normally, if they're already done for another customer, we can just download them and email them to you straight away. If we have to do them from scratch, like this year, it took us about 2.5 to 3 weeks. Okay, how do we deliver on that? Well, there's a few things that we do. One of the things that we do is we empower our product owners, our designers, our developers, we enable them. And this is one of the ways that we enable them. So this is actually essentially a screenshot from one of our training material. So we have a series of personas that we use. So this one is Marianne. Nice little picture of Marianne, cartoon character. She's 32 years old. She works at a tax and revenue office. Her job is to create tax assessments, so we get public revenue. Very important. And then we take it to the next level and talk about it as a usability and accessibility, a real people thing. So she currently suffers using a mouse due to a tennis elbow. She therefore needs to use the keyboard even more frequently, and she likes good contrast for verifying tax application data. So we have a number of these personas that we use to cover off all of the major usability and accessibility requirements, and to make it normal and natural to include accessibility as part of usability. Another thing that we do internally is the putting together of this product standard for accessibility. Now, being an international organisation, it gets very interesting trying to work across multiple different standards. So there are 3 that we primarily focus on. The first is WCAG 2.0 Level A and AA. The second is UX Section 508, and because our company started in Germany and because we have a market share of German businesses somewhere in the very high 90 percentile, we also include the German one, which I won't try to pronounce, but the short form is BITV 2.0. It's very similar in a lot of ways to WCAG 2.0 AA. So what we've had to do is actually take all of those 130 requirements and try and bring them into some sort of coherent section. So we've got it broken down into 6 main topics, such as information and text, visual perception, attributes and identifying UI elements, etc., that our designers and developers can work against to make sure this is included in their designs. Okay, now, a little bit on the challenges. Okay, so I said not every solution gets to reach that design standard, and here's a few of the reasons why. One is mergers and acquisitions. Companies like ours, you are buying in best of breed and niche players and new possibilities with AI at the moment all the time. We just bought 2 companies in the last week. Typically, in the past, it's taken about 2 years or so to integrate those fully into company procedures and processes. And in the meantime, they're still selling product, they're still contributing to our bottom line. Another is innovation. I'll come back to that on the next slide. Another is product timelines and expectations, because at the end of the day, we're not a charity, we are a business. There is a point, we have stakeholders, we need to make sure that we're still meeting expectations, and I know others have spoken about this before. So there is a point in the, sometimes that affects priorities. Another thing that we think about in terms of some of the challenges is general design, development and architecture. So Sarah, it was great to see, was talking about some of the complications of working across different layers and versions. So your operating system, your browser, your assistive tech, all of that, those different versions have a part to play and can interfere or have bugs themselves. Another thing that happens, of course, is what works better for some doesn't work as well or at all for others. We were just talking about button bias, one we've come across at, in some of the journeys with, say, the Australian Tax Office and the NDIS out at DHS, is segmented buttons. So segmented buttons behave like radio button groups, but they look like push buttons. So when you run it as a screen reader, and we favour the screen reader users, it works fine. It works just like a radio button group. When Dragon naturally speaking users came along, they expected to say push, and that didn't work so well. So in the end, we said, no, well, there's other options. Let's just not use segmented buttons. So these are complications sometimes. Probably the biggest complication of all is what's within the customer's control. Because we support so many different industries, so many different companies, there's a lot of customization, there's a lot of personalization to the company, to the organisation and to the user that's included. And of course, the particular combination of things that you choose, how well you do your on-site testing, how well you enable your people, and particularly administrators, support and maintenance procedures can impact on how well that is actually deployed to real users. So the big challenge that I usually face with administrators is locking down personalisation, including things like use of high contrast themes. And they say, but we've got to have our corporate theme and our corporate colours. And my answer to that is, look, by all means, have your corporate theme as default. But please tell me, is it really more important that it be in those specific colours, or that people be able to read the screen and do what they need to do? So please don't turn off the high contrast black and white themes. Okay, and innovation. Okay, so here's a little quote. By 2020, the average person will have more conversations with bots than with their spouse. That may already be happening for some of you. The growth of AI and all the speed of innovation that we deal with every day obviously is mixing things up a tremendous amount. A lot of the time here when it comes to innovation, we're simply trying to figure out where is the use case for enterprise at all. Even if there's a clear consumer use case, like chatbots for ordering your pizza and playing your music and dimming your lights, working out how that translates, or whether it translates at all, to an enterprise context, and then putting on layers of robustness and security, that's a bit of a challenge. Okay, so let's have a look at how we actually apply this in our flagship user experience. So our flagship user experience is based on 5 pillars. It has a full style design style guide, which I'm sure Sarah will like a lot, because it's got a full version history and a lot of detail in there. Of these 5 pillars, role-based, adaptive, simple, coherent, delightful, the most important one for accessibility is adaptive. That doesn't just mean it runs on desktop, tablet and phone. It doesn't just mean landscape and portrait orientation. It means you as an individual user should be able to tailor it to your specific personal needs and your current working environment. So I'm going to try and run this little video, and this is where we're going to have a little challenge just to give you a bit of a feel for what's there. But I did want to show you something of what it looks like at least. Okay, so we have this also, I'm running the video, but this is also available as a podcast, so I've included both links on the presentation. So this is talking about SAP Fiori and accessibility, usability for all, and we have our messages, and this is part of our awareness for customers and partners as well. So we're all people, we have different all right, I'm going to stop that because now I've lost my train of thought. Let me try and see that again. We're all differently abled. There we are. Physically, temporarily, permanently, by experience, by education, by age. Accessibility for us is usability. So one of our things, of course, theming provides individual situational experience. Stable light conditions, we have our default soft blue-grey theme. More contrast, Belize Plus. There is, by the way, also light sensitive, high contrast black. What they don't show on this video is high contrast white. Oh no, they do show, there you go. And it actually isn't just a colour change, it actually adjusts the font sizes and button sizes slightly. Bigger text, try zooming. So this is our Fiori Launchpad. It's a series of tiles grouped together where you start your tasks, and we're just showing it zooming up to 200% and backwards, the standard WCAG response. Can't look at the screen, we have a screen reader, and here's a little taste of the screen reader.
My inbox. All items. 9. 1 of 1. Enter. My inbox. Show navigation menu, button collapsed. Selected. Please approve the purchase order 4500062132.
Accessibility in SAP Fiori means improved usability for all. Okay. And I'm going to attempt to go back to the presentation. Did that work? Whee! All right, so I've listed these and I've got a screenshot of the high contrast black. We take it so seriously, we've even ended up designing our own font, which has won a Red Dot Award for Communication Design just last year. So we thought that the print font that we were using, mainly Arial, was not good enough for digital scenarios, and we have designed our own font to be more legible. When it comes to developers, a couple of things that we do, and I'm trying to represent this very quickly, but our primary HTML5 setup is called SAP UI5. There's also an open source version called OpenUI5. You have a lot of freedom as a developer. What we encourage most people to do as much as possible, if you have a common use case scenario, try and use the templates. The reason for that is if you build freestyle, you have to take care of the visual design, make sure you're obeying the rules, you have to think about the whole interaction a bit more harder, as well as the content. If you use templates, we can bake in a lot of the accessibility, you just focus on the content. So that's one of the things that helps. And one last thing before we get into how do you make it what do you do at yours is a little bit on chatbots. So yay, our chatbot is actually based on this same HTML5 based design. So I'm going to go back and test it actually according to Ross's suggestions. But one of the ways we approach artificial intelligence, and this is our conversational UI that we've got on the screen here, is we have 7 guiding principles for artificial intelligence. Those were just released this year. And One of them is very clearly, we enable business beyond bias, and that's how we approach accessibility. So for those of you who are dealing with SAP solutions, I'm going to skip through these. We've been dealing with this stuff for more than a decade. Yes, the older solutions, a lot of those technologies have some accessibility in them. It's a little more complicated, so come and talk to me. Yes, our flagship solution, S/4HANA, we consider the majority of those apps already accessible. We do have several testing labs. And you can read the details on there. And I've actually blogged on some of the exceptions and how they work. Basically, they've got alternatives. But I did want to finish up just with a couple of tips for your own workplaces. So everybody else has said this, but awareness, 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 awareness. Please make sure people are aware that it's there. Please point people to the resources. We have resources for designers in our Fiori design guidelines, for developers in our SAP UI5 software development kit, and for administrators, my personal bugbear. We have a central note with everything that they need to set up and how they should default settings or help people with particular impairments set up their particular environment to help them. The other thing, and this is probably the most important thing of all, is make sure your business users, and of course your accessibility testers, are actually aware of this stuff and how it works and where they find information on things like keyboard navigation, what's the prerequisites for screen readers, etc. So again, I've given some references here to the user guide and to the note that has, we have that in PDF and Word. So you can hopefully just give it to them and they can read all about it. So that was very rushed, but I appreciate the time constraints we're under, and I'm keeping everybody from afternoon tea, so I will finish up, but please reach out to me. I hope some of that was helpful. If you are at an organisation that's using SAP solutions, please use this as a reference guide, and please, by all means, come and talk to me. I'm more than happy to help you on that journey. There's a lot to it, and we've been doing this for a while. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jocelyn. Yep, thank you very much. And time for afternoon tea, so if we can come down. If we can be back, can we please be back ready for the next session at 3:15? Does that work? Great, 3:15. See you then. Thank you.